This is the Ministry of Truth. I'm Gordon Comstock. This is chapters 5 and 6 from American inventor Samuel Morse's 1835 long lost and probably suppressed classic, Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States. This is part 3, chapters 5 and 6. And this is the book, or a book, one of several books, that the Collins brothers, Philip and Paul Michael, I believe, the Collins brothers are afraid to research. Imagine that. Anyway, let's get going. Chapter 5, Samuel Morse's Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States from 1835. What I have advanced in my previous chapters may have convinced my readers that there is good reason for believing that the despots of Europe are attempting, by the spread of popery in this country, to subvert its free institutions. Yet, many may think that there are so many counteracting causes in the constitution of our society that this effort to bind us with the cast-off chains of the bigotry and superstition of Europe cannot meet with success. I will, therefore, in the present chapter, consider some of the points in our political system of which advantage has already been taken to attack us by the wily enemies of our liberties. It is a beautiful feature in our Constitution that every man is left to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience, that the Church is separated from the state, and that equal protection is granted to all creeds. In thus tolerating all sects, we have admitted to equal protection not only those sects whose religious faith and practice support the principle on which the free toleration of all is founded, but also that unique, that solitary sect, the Catholic, which builds and supports its system on the destruction of all toleration. Yes, the Catholic is permitted to work in the light of Protestant toleration, to mature his plans and to execute his designs, to extinguish that light and destroy the hands that hold it. It is no refutation of the charge of intolerance here made against Catholics as a sect to show that small bodies of them, under peculiar circumstances, have been tolerant, or that in this country, where they have always been a small minority, they make high professions of ardent love for the republican, tolerant institutions of our government. Sounds like Alan Keyes or Pat Buchanan. No one can be deceived by evidence so partial and circumscribed, while the blood of the persecuted for opinion's sake stains with the deepest tinge every page of the history of that church, aye, even while it is still wet upon the dungeon floors of Italy, while the intolerant and anti-republican principles of popery are now weakly thundered from the Vatican and echoed in our ears by almost every arrival from Europe. All right, footnote here, a rather long footnote. Here goes. Sanguinary spirit still existing in modern popery. If any suppose that popery has changed its intolerant character in modern times, we refer them to the following specimen of its spirit. It is popery of the present day, popery of 1833. In the recent journals of Modena in Italy are articles signed by the Duke of Canossa, the language of which knows no bounds. He justifies the St. Bartholomew's massacre. He says, quote, "When a disease has made such progress, it cannot be cured by magnesia and calomel to save life. Resort must be had to arsenic. If Charles IX had recoiled from the massacre of the Huguenots, he would certainly have perished a few weeks after upon the scaffold, as happened to the indulgent and compassionate Louis XVI, because he took an opposite course. He who in such a case has not the courage of a lion and does not resolve on rigorous measures is lost. The pusillanimous alone are ignorant of this truth." Unquote. Such shocking sentiments, be it remembered, are published in a country where there is a censorship of the press, and they are, therefore, the language of the government. The Duke reasons like a true legitimate. The happiness and lives of the people, to any amount, are mere chaff compared with the happiness and life of that sainted bauble called a king. His reasoning amounts to this, quote, "Better that thousands of the common people should perish by the bloodiest butchery than that the single life of one human being endowed with divine right to reign should, like Louis XVI, perish on the scaffold." Unquote. It is not necessary to defend the shedding of royal blood, but there is a trick of kingcraft which ought to be exposed because its influence is not unfelt in this country. The divine right to reign is first assumed. Then the human being, thus invested with power, partakes of divinity. He becomes sacred, and all the names and paraphernalia of idolatrous worship surround him. He becomes a god. Every word he utters, every step he takes, every action, however unimportant in any other human being, is invested in this earthly divinity with a sacred character. Does the God-King ride out, the whole country must know the important event. Is he married? The whole nation keeps jubilee. Is he dead? The world is clad in mourning. The misfortunes of his offspring are magnified and consecrated by all the arts of the imagination, by all the embellishments of romance. Is an illustration wanted? Take a recent case. Look at the history of the Duchess de Berry, an infamous woman, notoriously profligate, of a character that in common life would condemn her to the neglect of the world, and cast her out of all society. But she is a princess. She has a spark of royal divinity that shines upon her brazen front, and the duped multitude bow in adoration before her. Her sufferings, her wanderings, her dress in the minutest particulars, her words, her looks, are the subject of sympathetic appeals to the compassion of the world. Ladies shed tears over the distresses of the unfortunate princess. Alas, alas, that royal blood should suffer. And are we not influenced by this mawkish, morbid sympathy for suffering despots? Where are our sympathies when the interested statements of a government-controlled foreign press inform us of the struggles of the people against age-consecrated oppression? Are they with the people? Do we ever suspect the truth of the glowing details of the doings of the scandalous mob, the high-wrought accounts of outrage and rebellion of a wicked rabble against lawful authority, which circulate through our land, the production abroad of pensioned writers, of a licensed press, and those, too, without remark or explanation from our press? What should be the feelings of a true American? Where should be his sympathies who has been nurtured in the air of liberty, who has learned from his father's lips the black catalogue of despotic wrongs which his ancestors suffered, and which were defended by all the tricks and glosses and arts of oppression? If any human being should feel quick sympathy with the struggles of the people, should examine with the greatest care the charges preferred against them, and exercise a willing charity for their apparent or real excesses, and quick mistrust of all the doings, representations, and fair speeches of despotism, it is an American. End of footnote. Let me not be charged with accusing the Catholics of the United States with intolerance. They are too small a body as yet fully to act out their principles, and their present conduct does not affect the general question in any way, unless it may be to prove that they are not genuine and consistent Catholics. The conduct of a small, insulated body, under the restraints of the society around it, is of no weight in deciding the character of the sect. While there are nations of the same infallible faith, acting out its legitimate principles uncontrolled, and producing fruits by which all may discern, without danger of mistake, the true nature of the tree. If popery is tolerant, let us see Italy and Austria and Spain and Portugal. Open their doors to the teachers of the Protestant faith. Let these countries grant to Protestant missionaries as freely as we grant to Catholics leave to disseminate their doctrine through all classes in their dominions. Then may popery speak of toleration. Then may we believe that it has felt the influence of the spirit of the age and has reformed. But then it will not be popery, for popery never changes. It is infallibly the same, infallibly intolerant. The conspirators against our liberties, who have been admitted from abroad through the liberality of our institutions, are now organized in every part of the country. They are all subordinates, standing in regular steps of slave and master, from the most abject dolt that obeys the commands of his priest, up to the great master slave, Metternich, who commands and obeys his illustrious master, the emperor. Footnote: Popery is organized throughout the world. This organization is asserted in the late proclamation of the Pope to the Portuguese. In the catalogue of his complaints, he says, quote, "Nevertheless, that which principally afflicts us is that those acts and measures have evidently for their aim to break every bond of union with that venerable chair of the blessed Peter," unquote, his own throne, quote, "which Jesus Christ has made the center of unity, and thus the society of communion being once broken, to wound the church by the most pernicious schism. In fact, how can there be unity in the body when the members are not united to the head and do not obey it," unquote. End of footnote. They report from one to another like the sub-officers of an army, up to the commander-in-chief at Vienna. Not the Pope, for he is but a subordinate of Austria. Footnote: Lest the charge often made in these numbers should seem gratuitous, of the Pope being the creature of Austria, and entirely subservient to the imperial cabinet, it may be as well to state that the writer was in Rome during the deliberations of the conclave, respecting the election of the present pontiff. It was interesting to him to hear the speculations of the Italians on the probability of this or that cardinal's election. Couriers were daily arriving from their various despotic powers, and intrigues were rife in the antechambers of the Quirinal Palace. Now it was said that Spain would carry her candidate, now Italy, and now Austria, and when Cardinal Capellani was proclaimed Pope, the universal cry, mixed too with low-muttered curses, was that Austria had succeeded. The new Pope had scarcely chosen his title of Gregory XVI, and passed through the ceremonies of coronation before the revolution in his states gave him the opportunity of calling in Austria to take possession of the patrimony of St. Peter, which his own troops could not keep for an hour. And at this moment Austrian soldiers hold the Roman legations in submission to the cabinet of Vienna. Is not the Pope a creature of Austria? End of footnote. Folks, right there. This is Gordon talking. Side note. This is primary evidence, folks. Samuel Morse just told you he was in Rome, investigating himself whether the Congress of Vienna, headed up by Austria, and apparently at this time, according to Morse, the Pope came second to Austria, but that this Congress of Vienna was plotting against the United States. This is primary source material, folks. It doesn't get any more reliable than this. Okay, let's continue on. There is a similar organization among the Catholics of other countries, and the whole Catholic Church is thus prepared to throw its weight of power and wealth into the hands of Austria or any holy alliance of despots who may be persuaded to embark for the safety of their dynasties in the crusade against the liberties of the country, which, by its simple existence in opposition to their theory of legitimate power, is working revolution and destruction to their thrones. Now, to this dangerous conspiracy, what have we to oppose in the discipline of Protestant sects? However well organized, each according to its own manner, these different sects may be, there is not one of them that can, by any possibility, derive strength through its organization from foreign sects of the same name. Nor is this a matter of regret. It is right that it should be so. No nation can be truly independent where it is otherwise. Foreign influence, then, cannot find its way into the country through any of the Protestant sects, to the danger of the state. In this respect, Catholics stand alone. They are already the most powerful and dangerous sect in the country, for they are not confined in their schemes and means like other sects to our own borders, but they work with the minds and the funds of all despotic Europe. And not only are each of the Protestant sects deprived of foreign aid, they are weak collectively in having no common bond of union among themselves. So far as political action is concerned, the mutual jealousies of the different sects have hitherto prevented this, and it is a weakness boasted of by Catholics, and of which advantage is, and ever will be taken, while the unnatural estrangement lasts. Catholics have boasted that they can play off one sect against another, for in the petty controversies that divide the contending parties, the pliable conscience of the Jesuit enables him to throw the weight of his influence on either side, as his interest may be the command of his superiors, and the alleged good of the Church, that is, the power of the priesthood, being paramount to all other considerations. This pliability of conscience, so advantageous in building up any system of oppression, religious or political, presents us with strangely contradictory alliances. In Europe, popery supports the most high-handed despotism, lends its thunders to awe the people into the most abject obedience, and maintains at the top of its creed the indissoluble union of church and state, while in this country there is yet feeling its way, oh, how consistent. It has allied itself with the democracy of the land. It is loudest in its denunciations of tyranny, the tyranny of American patriots. It is first to scent out oppression, sees afar off the machinations of the Native American Protestants to unite church and state, and puts itself forth the most zealous guardian of civil and religious liberty. With such sentinels, surely our liberties are safe. With such guardians of our rights, we may sleep in peace. Sounds a little sarcastic to me there, Sam. Another weak point in our system is our laws encouraging immigration and affording facilities to naturalization. Boy, Sam, if you were only around today, you'd, oh, wow, what he would say about today's immigration, open borders. Okay, rather long footnote here. Immigration and our naturalization law. The subject of immigration is one of those which demands the immediate attention of the nation. It is a question which concerns all parties, and if the writer is not mistaken in his reading of the signs of the times, the country is waking to a sense of the alarming evil produced by our naturalization laws. Let us war among ourselves in party warfare with every lawful weapon that we can convert to our purpose. It is our birthright to have our own opinion, and earnestly to contend for it. But let us court no foreign friends. Every American should feel his national blood mount at the very thought of foreign interference, while we welcome the intelligent and persecuted of all nations, and give them an asylum and a share in our privileges. Let us beware lest we admit to dangerous fellowship those who cannot and will not use our hospitality aright. In other words, Samuel Morse is saying, do not let La Raza in. Do not let the brown berets in. Oh, wow. Sam, we need you now. Back to Sam. That such may come, and do come, there is no reason to doubt. Consider the following testimony of an emigrant given before a justice in Albany. He says that, quote, in June last, the parish officers paid the passages of himself and about 40 others of the same parish from Chatham to the city of Boston in America on board the ship Royalist, Captain Parker, and that they landed in Boston in the month of last July. That the parish officers gave him 30 shillings sterling in money, in addition to paying his passage. That he is now entirely destitute of the means of living, and is unable to labor, and prays for relief, unquote. Now here are 40 paupers cast upon our shores from one parish in England, and in 5 years they become citizens, entitled to vote. Is there an American of any party who can believe that there is no danger in admitting to equal privileges with himself such a class of foreigners? A remedy to this crying evil admits of not a moment's delay. At this moment the ocean swarms with ships crowded with this wretched population, bearing them from misery abroad to misery here. Boy, Sam Morse, we need you now. The California hospitals and school systems are collapsing because of illegal immigration from Mexico, because of just what he was talking about, admitting nothing but welfare recipients, by and large, admitting third world paupers to leech off the American system. There's only so many people that can fit in a lifeboat, folks. Continue with Sam Morse. The expense incurred in this city, New York, for the support of foreign paupers, it is well known, is enormous. In Philadelphia, more than 3/4 of the inmates of their almshouse are foreigners. Whole families have been known to come from on board ship and go directly to the almshouse. Welfare. In the Boston dispensary, there were, the last year, 1831, from 2 districts, only 477 patients. Of these, 441 were foreigners, leaving but 36 of our own population to be provided for. In the Boston almshouse, the following returns show the increase of foreign paupers in 5 years. The year ending September 30th, 1829, Americans 395, foreigners 284. The year ending September 30th, 1834, but 5 years later, Americans 340, foreigners 613. Thus we see that native pauperism has decreased in 5 years, and foreign pauperism has more than doubled. In Cambridge, Massachusetts, more than 4/5 of the paupers are foreigners. The first and immediate step that should be taken is to press upon Congress and upon the nation instant attention to the naturalization laws. We must first stop this leak in the ship. through which the muddy waters from without threaten to sink us. If we mean to keep our country, this lifeboat of the world, thank you, Sam Morse, thinking just like me, from foundering with all the crew, we must take on board no more from the European wreck until we have safely landed and sheltered its present freight. But would you have us forfeit the character of the country as the asylum of the world? No, but it is a mistaken philanthropy, indeed, that would attempt to save one at the expense of the lives of thousands, that would receive into our families those dying of the plague. Now that's interesting. Side note, with the bleeding idiot liberals of today, you know, the commoners, the liberal hippie descendants, they will by and large be pro-illegal immigration. They will say that we need to, that they think that this lifeboat of America can hold, they never think about it, that can hold an indefinite amount of people. So to them, they wouldn't consider what Sam Morse just said, that it's better to save the lives of thousands than to save one. To them, to the bleeding heart liberal hippie descendants, we're supposed to take in as many illegals and damn the country. They don't even think about the second part, the damn the country part. But listen to this. This is total inconsistency, because these same bleeding heart hippie descendant common liberals, they also, by and large, have fallen for the lie, the propaganda of eugenics, of population control. And so, to them, very much so, they're, in that scenario, they're more than willing to sacrifice a few in order to save the greater majority. Although they don't realize, of course, that Ted Turner and Jacques Cousteau and all of the other oligarch elites, they actually want to sacrifice the majority. It's just, oh my goodness, to be a liberal, a common hippie descendant liberal, and I'm surrounded with them where I live, you can't have a brain. You can't have a brain. And so nowadays we have hippie descendant commoner liberals, and you have the fascists, the neoconservative fascists. And that leaves about, 0.5% of the American population actually thinking. Imagine that. So, if you're listening to this show, you might be one of those. And boy, you ever feel alone? I don't blame you. Oh gosh, you got basically it's the CNN watching idiots versus the Fox News watching idiots. And that composes 99% of the American population. And we deserve to be conquered, bottom line. All right, next up, continuing on with Samuel Morse, this is still the footnote. Our naturalization laws were never intended to convert this land into the almshouse of Europe, to cover the alarming importation of everything in the shape of man that European tyranny thinks fit to send adrift from its shores, nor so to operate as to compel us to surrender back all the blessings of that freedom from which our fathers paid so dear a price into the keeping of its foreign enemies. No, we must have the law so amended that no foreigner who may come into the country after the passage of the new law shall ever be allowed to exercise the elective franchise. This alone meets the evil in its fullest extent. Hear, hear, Samuel Morse. In other words, Samuel Morse is saying, all right, we can let these people in, these poor Roman Catholic paupers, but they cannot vote when they get here. Wow. Because the very nature of what they vote for, take a look in Los Angeles. They have an illegal alien supporting mayor of Los Angeles now, because these illegal aliens voted him in. Samuel Morse had a plan to stop that. Wow. Back in 1835. Okay, continuing. Who can complain of injustice in the enactment of such a law? Not the Native American. He is not touched by it. Certainly not the foreigner now in the country, whether naturalized or not. It cannot operate against him. It would take away no right from a single individual in any country. This law would withhold a favor, not a right, from foreigners, and from those foreigners only who may hereafter come into the country. If foreigners abroad choose to take offense at the law, we are not under obligations to consult their wishes. They need not come here. This favor, it should be understood, has repeatedly been abused, and it is necessary for the safety of our institutions in future to withhold it. The pressing dangers to the country from popery, which I think I have shown not to be fictitious. Other visible indications of foreign influence in the political horizon, the bold organization of foreigners as foreigners in our elections, like Antonio Villagrosa, or Bela Lugosi, whatever, in Los Angeles, the illegal alien-loving mayor. These all demand the instant attention of Americans, if they mean not to be robbed by foreign intrigue of their liberty and their very name. End of footnote. In the early state of the country, liberality in these points was thought to be of advantage, as it promoted the cultivation of our wild lands. But the dangers which now threaten our free institutions from this source more than balance all advantages of this character. The great body of emigrants to this country are the hard-working, mentally neglected poor of Catholic countries in Europe, and that still continues to this day, who have left a land where they were enslaved for one of freedom. However well disposed they may be to the country which protects them and adopts them as citizens, they are not fitted to act with judgment in the political affairs of their new country. Hear, hear. Like native citizens, educated from their infancy in the principles and habits of our institutions. Most of them are too ignorant to act at all for themselves, and expect to be guided wholly by others. Boy, have I seen that firsthand. Working with the best of these illegal immigrants, the ones who actually wanted to be citizens. They wanted to be led around by the nose. They still had the slave mentality. I've seen it firsthand. They were the nicest people, but they had no clue about God-given rights. Nothing. Anyway, continuing. These others are, of course, their priests. Priests have ruled them at home by divine right. Their ignorant minds cannot ordinarily be emancipated from their habitual subjection. I have seen it personally, folks. They will not learn nor appreciate their exemption from any such usurpation of priestly power in this country, and they are implicitly at the beck of their spiritual guides. They live surrounded by freedom, yet liberty of conscience, right of private judgment, whether in religion or politics, are as effectually excluded by the priests as if the Code of Austria already ruled the land. Yep. They form a body of men whose habits of action, for I cannot say thought, are opposed to the principles of our free institutions, for they are not accessible to the reasonings of the press. They cannot and do not think for themselves. Amen. I have seen this firsthand. Every unlettered Catholic emigrant, therefore, that comes into the country is adding to a mass of ignorance. Hear, hear. Sam Morse, man, guy was a prophet. The problem is still here today. It's just at such a greater magnitude because we didn't heed this warning of Samuel Morse. Now we're at a much more, metastasized state in this nation. Okay, Sam, let's pick it up. Which it will be difficult to reach by any liberal instruction, and however honest, and I have no doubt most of them are so, yet from the nature of things they are but obedient instruments in the hands of their more knowing leaders to accomplish the designs of their foreign masters. Republican education, were it allowed to freely come into contact with their minds, would doubtless soon furnish a remedy for an evil which, in the existing state of things, we have no cure. It is but to continue for a few years the sort of immigration that is now daily pouring in its thousands from Europe, and our institutions, for aught that I can see, are at the mercy of a body of foreigners, officered by foreigners, and held completely under the control of a foreign power. We may then have reason to say that we are the dupes of our own hospitality. Hear, hear. We have sheltered in our well-provided house a needy body of strangers who, well filled with our cheer, are encouraged by the unaccustomed familiarity with which they are treated, first to upset the regulations of the household, and then turn their host and his family out of doors. Oh, man. Wow. I'm getting goosebumps here. Seriously, Samuel Morse described the situation in America today, only it's so much worse today. Oh, man. Samuel Morse saw it back in 1833. So you welcome these people in, and even the best of the lot, the illegal immigrants, even the best of the lot that want to be free and become citizens and learn English, even the best of them, they're so illiterate in terms of freedom and God-given rights that they are going to destroy the thing that is the very system that is aiding them, that is offering them succor. They're going to destroy it by the very fact that they don't understand it. They're too ignorant. They're going to kick the hosts who help them out of their own household. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right. They're going to do it by breeding, too. Anyway, let's go on to chapter 6, eh? I will continue the consideration of some of the points in our political system of which the foreign conspirators take advantage in their liberties on our liberties. We have seen that from the nature of the case, the emigrant Catholics generally are shamefully illiterate and without opinions of their own. They are and must be under the direction of their priests. The press, with its arguments for or against any political measure, can have no effect on minds taught only to think as the priest thinks, and to do whatever the priest commands. Here is a large body of ignorant men brought into our community who are unapproachable by any of the ordinary means of enlightening the people. A body of men who servilely obey a set of priests imported from abroad, bound to the country by none of the usual ties, owing allegiance and service to a foreign government, depending on that government for promotion and reward. And this reward, too, depends on the manner in which they discharge the duties prescribed to them by their foreign master, which is, doubtless for the present, to confine themselves simply and wholly to increasing the number of their sect and the influence of the Pope in this country. It is men thus officered and of such a character that we have placed in all respects on a level at our elections with the same number of native, patriotic, and intelligent citizens. The Jesuits are fully aware of the advantage they derive from this circumstance. They know that a body of men admitted to citizenship, unlearned in the true nature of American liberty, exercising the elective franchise, the right to vote, totally uninfluenced by the ordinary methods of reasoning, but passively obedient only to the commands of their priests, must give those priests great consequence in the eyes of the leaders of political parties. They know that these leaders must esteem it very important that the priests be propitiated. And how is a Catholic priest to be propitiated? How but by stipulating for that which will increase his power, or the power of the Church. For be it always borne in mind that they are identical. The Roman Church is the body of priests and prelates. The laity have only to obey and to pay, not to exercise authority. The priest must be favored in his plans of destroying Protestantism and building up popery. He must have money from the public treasury to endow Catholic institutions. He must be allowed to have charters for these institutions, which will confer extraordinary powers upon their Jesuit trustees. Footnote. One college at the West under Austrian influence. The following fact illustrates the dangerous, successful, intriguing spirit of the Jesuits and the culpable negligence of one of our state legislatures, that of Kentucky, who has thus suffered itself to be the dupe of popish artifice. St. Joseph's College at Bardstown, Kentucky, was incorporated by the state legislature in 1824. The Bishop of Bardstown is moderator, and 5 priests are trustees. And there is this provision in the charter, quote, "The said trustees shall hold their station in said college 1 year only, at which time the said moderator shall have the power of electing others, or the same, if he should think proper, and increase the number to 12. And this power may be exercised by him every year thereafter, or his successor or successors to the bishopric. And in case of the removal, resignation, or death of either of the said trustees, his place may be supplied by an appointment that may be made by the said bishop, or his successor or successors, who may also become moderators in the institution, and act and do as the said B.J. Flaggett is empowered by this act to do," unquote. The Bishop of Bardstown, in a letter to a friend in Europe dated 1825, says, quote, "Our legislature has just incorporated the college. The bishops of Bardstown are continued perpetually its moderators or rectors. I might have dictated conditions which I could not have made more advantageous or honorable. And what is still more flattering is that these privileges were granted almost without any discussion and with unanimity in both houses. Now the Pope, it is well known, appoints all bishops. Here, then, is one college in the country already placed in perpetuo under the exclusive control of the Pope, and consequently for an indefinite period under that of Austria." End of footnote. He, the Jesuit, must be permitted quietly to break down the Protestant Sabbath by encouraging Catholics to buy and sell on that day as on others. He must be permitted, in one word, he must have all the powers and privileges which the law or the officers appointed to administer the law can conveniently bestow upon him. The demagogue or the party who will promise to do most for the accomplishment of these objects will secure all the votes which he controls. Surely, there is great danger to our present institutions from this source, and men as skillful as are the Jesuits, we may be sure, will not fail to use the power thus thrown into their hands to work great mischief to the Republic. The recklessness and unprincipled character of too many of our politicians, oh boy, that hasn't changed much, give great advantage to these conspirators. There is a set of men in the country who will have power and office, cost what they may. Men who, without a particle of true patriotism, will yet ring the changes on the glory and honor of their country, talk loud of liberty, flatter the lowest prejudices, and fawn upon the powerful and the influential, men who study politics only, that they may balance the chances of their own success in falling in with or opposing this or that fluctuating interest, without caring whether that interest tends to the security or the downfall of their country's institutions. Yeah, career politicians. Yeah, I see. To such politicians, a body of men thus drilled by priests presents a well-fitted tool. The bargain with the priest will be easily struck. Give me office, and I will take care of the interests of your church. the effect of the bargain upon the great moral or political interests of the country will not for a moment influence the calculation. Thus we have among us a body of men, a religious sect, who can exercise a direct controlling influence in the politics of the country, and can be moved together in a solid phalanx. We have a church interfering directly and most powerfully in the affairs of the state. Thank you, Samuel Morse. I wish people would have listened to you. There is not in the whole country a parallel to this among other sects. What clergymen of the Methodists or Baptists or Episcopalians or any other denomination could command the votes of the members of their several congregations in the election of an individual to political office? The very idea of such power is preposterous to a Protestant. No free man, no man accustomed to judge for himself, would submit even to be advised, unasked, by his minister in a matter of this kind, much less dictated to. Connected with these evils and assisting to increase them, we have a press, to an alarming extent, wanting in independence. Yeah, controlled media, right on. Most of our journals are avowedly attached to a political party or to particular individuals. They are like counsel retained for a particular cause. They are to say everything that makes in favor of their client, and conceal everything that makes against him. Does a question of principle arise, of fundamental importance to the country, the inquiry with a journal thus pledged is not, how are our free institutions, how is the country affected by the decision, but how will the decision affect the interests of our particular party or favorite? How few are there among our newspaper editors who dare to take a manly stand for or against a principle that affects vitally the Constitution, if it is found to bear unfavorably upon their party or their candidate? A press thus wanting in magnanimity and independence is the fit instrument for advancing the purposes of unprincipled men, and editors of this stamp, and they are confined to no particular party, whether they have followed out their conduct or not to its legitimate results, can easily be made the tools of a despot to subvert the liberties of their country. Again, we have, still unsubdued, some weaknesses. Perhaps they belong to human nature, of which advantage may be taken to the injury of our republican character and in aid of despotism, and which may seem to some too trivial to merit notice in connection with the more serious matters just considered. One of these weaknesses is an anti-republican fondness for titles. Footnote: glory-giving titles. One of the plainest doctrines of American republicanism, which is essentially democratic, is that mere glory-giving titles, or titles of servility, are entirely opposed to its whole spirit. They are considered as one of those artificial means of kingcraft by which it fosters that aristocratic, unholy pride in the human heart, which loves to domineer over its fellow man, which loves artificial distinction of ranks, a privileged class, and of course which helps to sustain that whole system of regal and papal usurpation which has so long cursed mankind. If such titles are to some extent still acknowledged in this country, they have either been thoughtlessly but unwisely used as mere epithets of courtesy, or they are the remains of old, deep-rooted foreign habits which, in spite of the uncongenial soil to which they have been transplanted, still maintain a sort of withered existence. It now, however, becomes a serious inquiry whether this practice, hitherto seemingly unimportant, may not be attended without or with danger to the institutions of the country. For popery, it appears, is already taking advantage of this, as of all other weaknesses in our habits and customs, to introduce its anti-democratic system, and this too while it manifests in words great zeal in defense of democratic liberty. Let the democracy look well to this. Is it asked, to what extent should titles or names of distinction be abolished throughout the land? The answer is plain. Every title that merely designates an office is perfectly in accordance with our institutions, such as President, Secretary, Senator, General, Commodore, etc. So are letters after a name which designate the office or membership in a society. But titles of reverence, titles which imply moral qualities such as Your Excellency, Your Honor, the Reverend, Right Reverend, Honorable, etc., and letters which imply moral or intellectual superiority, I think it must be conceded, are now not only useless, but dangerous. There needs no law to abolish these gewgaw appendages to a name. They must be left to the good sense of the individual who uses them to discontinue them, and fortunately they generally belong to intellectual men who have minds capable of discerning the remote evils to which the practice leads, and patriotism enough to make a greater sacrifice than this occasion calls for to avert dangers which threaten their country. Will it be said that this is a little matter? Nothing is of little consequence that may endanger, however remotely, the civil liberty of the country. Nay, more, no practice is unworthy of reform, which continued may aid by its example in the surrender of religious liberties into the hands of popery. End of footnote. And whoever has lived in the old world and knows the extraordinary and powerful influence which mere titles of honor exercise over the minds of men, and their tendency to keep in due subjection the artificial ranks into which despotic and aristocratic power divide the people, subduing the lower orders to their lords and masters, will not think it amiss in this place to draw attention to the subject. Republicans as we are, I fear we are influenced in a greater degree than we are aware by the high-sounding epithets with which despotism and aristocracy surround their officers to awe into reverence the ignorant multitude. A name having half a dozen titles for its avant couriers, and as many for its rear guard, swells into an importance, even in the estimation of our citizens, which the name alone, and especially the individual himself, could never assume. Let Mr. Brown or Mr. Smith or any other intelligent, upright, active citizen be elected president of a benevolent society. Does he excite the gaze of those who meet him or inspire awe in the multitude? No one regards him but as a respectable, useful member of the community. But let us learn that a gentleman, not half as intelligent, or upright, or active, is to land in our city, who is announced as the most illustrious Archduke and Eminence, His Imperial Highness the Cardinal and Archbishop of Olmütz, Rudolph. This last is the gentleman's real name, highest curator of the Leopold Foundation. And although not half as capable in any respect as a Mr. Smith or a Mr. Brown, or 10,000 other honest, untitled citizens among us, I very much fear that the battery, the multitude, would be thronged, and the windows in Broadway would be in demand, and the streets filled with a gaping crowd to see a man who could have such a mighty retinue of glittering epithets about him. Yet this title-blazoned gentleman holds the same office as Mr. Brown or Mr. Smith. Poor human nature! Alas for its weakness. Footnote. There is reason to believe we are reforming in this particular, for we have now titled foreigners, respectable men, travelers in the country, and our press no longer lends itself to announce their unimportant presence or movements. End of footnote. Who is not struck with the difference of effect upon the imagination when we describe a person thus: Mr. So-and-so, a good-hearted old gentleman, rather weak in the head, who finds in the manufacture of sealing wax one of the chief and most agreeable employments of his time. And when we should describe a man thus: His Imperial Majesty Francis I, Emperor of Austria, King of Jerusalem, Hungary, Bohemia, of Lombardy, Venice, Dalmatia, Croatia, Slavonia, Galicia, and Lodomeria, Archduke of Austria, Duke of Lorena, Salzburg, Styria, Carinthia, and Carniola, Grand Prince of Transylvania, Margrave of Moravia, Count Prince of Habsburg and Tyrol, etc., etc. And yet, these two descriptions belong to one and the same individual. There used to be a sound democratic feeling in the country which spurned such glosses of character and frowned out of use mere glory-giving titles. Austria, however, is gradually, as fast as is thought safe, introducing these titled gentlemen into the country. Bishop Fenwick, a Catholic priest, is, quote, His Grace of Cincinnati, unquote. Mr. Vicar General Reese, another priest, is only, quote, unquote, His Reverence. And Bishop Flaggett and all other bishops are simply Monsignors. This title in a foreign language being less harsh at present to Republican ears than its plump, aristocratic English translation. My Lord Bishop of New York, my Lord Bishop of Boston, my Lord Bishop of Charleston, etc., etc., etc. As we improve, however, under Catholic instruction, we may come to be quite reconciled even to His Eminence Cardinal so-and-so, and to all the other graduated fooleries which are so well adapted to dazzle the ignorant. The scarlet carriage of a cardinal, too, bedizened with gold, and containing the sacred person of some Jesuit, all scarlet and humility, as is at this day often seen in Rome, may yet excite our admiration as it rolls through our streets. And even a pope, for in these republican times in Italy, who knows but His Holiness may have. Yes, even a pope, a vice-regent of God, the great divinely appointed appointer of rulers, the very center from which all titles emanate, may possibly in his scarlet and gold and jewel-decked equipage astonish our eyes, and prostrate us on our knees as he moves down Broadway. To be sure, some of his Republican friends, now in strange holy alliance with his faithful subjects here, might find their Protestant knees at first a little stiff. Yet the Catholic schools, which they are encouraging with their votes and their money and their influence, will soon furnish them good instructors in the art of reverential gesture and genuflection. Again, there are some minds of a peculiarly sensitive cast that cannot bear to have the subject of religious opinion mooted in any way in the secular journals. They use a plausible argument that satisfies them, namely, that religion is too sacred a subject to be discussed by the daily press. I agree to a certain extent, and in a modified sense with this sentiment, but it should be remembered that all is not religion which passes under that name. The public safety makes it necessary sometimes to strip off the disguise and show the true character of a design which may have assumed the sacred cloak. the better to pass unchallenged by such feeble-hearted objectors. Were such objections valid, how easy would it be for the most dangerous political designs, as in the case we are considering, to assume a religious garb, and so escape detection. The exposure I am now making of the foreign designs upon our liberties may possibly be mistaken for an attack on the religion of the Catholics. Yet I have not meddled with the conscience of any Catholic. If he honestly believes the doctrine of transubstantiation, or that by doing penance he will prepare himself for heaven, or in the existence of purgatory, or in the efficacy of the prayers and masses of priests, to free the souls of his relatives from its flames, or that it's right to worship the Virgin Mary, or to pray to saints, or keep holy days, or to refrain from meat at certain times, or to go on pilgrimages, or in the virtue of relics, or that none but Catholics can be saved, or many other points. However wrong I may and do think him to be, it is foreign from the design of these chapters to speak against them. But when he proclaims to the world that all power, temporal as well as spiritual, exists in the Pope, denying, of course, the fundamental doctrine of republicanism, that liberty of conscience is a raving and most pestilential error. Those were quotes from popes. Here's another. That he execrates and detests the liberty of the press. When his intolerant creed asserts that no faith is to be kept with heretics, all being heretics in the creed of a Catholic who are not Catholics, and many other palpable anti-republican as well as immoral doctrines, he has then blended with his creed political tenets that vitally affect the very existence of our government, and no association with religious belief shall shield them from observation and rebuke. It would indeed be singular if these were quote-unquote ravings. The Pope's phrase is appropriate here. Subversive of the fundamental principles of our government, should be shielded from exposure because misnamed religion. If incendiaries or robbers should ensconce themselves within a church, from the windows and towers of which they were assailing the people, the cry of sacrilege shall not prevent us from attempts to dislodge them, though the walls which protect them should suffer in the conflict. All right, that was chapters 5 and 6 from the 1835 long-lost, probably highly suppressed book, Foreign Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States, by American inventor Samuel Morse. You can find this book online. If you might not believe that this book is real, I wouldn't blame you. This stuff is so shocking. But you can see it for yourself. Somehow Charles Wilcox has a copy of it. You can see it in PDF file, www.ctwilcox.com. Thanks for listening.